Welcome back to the Weekly Driver Podcast. My name is James Rea. I'm the editor and publisher of theweeklydriver.com. I'm an automotive columnist for Bay Area News Group, which is the San Jose Mercury and the East Bay Times. My co-host, as usual, is Bruce Aldrich, car enthusiast, car mechanic, very knowledgeable guy in the automotive field. He doesn't think so, but I think he's more knowledgeable than I am, which, you know, I don't know much.
Not saying anything.
That's not saying much, but Bruce is here to kind of keep me honest. And today we're going to talk about a segment of the car industry that's very unique, and that is the phenomenon and the long legacy of convertibles. And gee, when I was a young guy, I had my first convertible at age 16 or 17, and I thought I was something special because I had a Volkswagen convertible and a Karmann Ghia convertible, and on a warm night you're driving and with your buddies or with your girlfriend, and life's pretty good with a convertible when the top is down and you're having a lot of fun on a warm summer night. So Bruce, how are you doing? And let's talk convertibles.
I'm doing good. I wish I was in a convertible right now. I think I rode the same convertible as you because I have that same feeling. You know, a warm summer night, especially
right.
in California out here, you just can't beat it. But my first, I guess my only convertible was a 69 Fiat 850.
Wow.
And what a miserable little car, and even a worse convertible. But
yeah.
Hey, with the top down and you're driving on the coast highway on a nice day, everything was just fine.
All your troubles go away. Like, what troubles did we have when we were young guys anyway, right? We didn't have any troubles.
Just like sitting up on the bow of a boat.
Yeah.
Hauling.
Well, I had the Bug and I had the Karmann Ghia, and my father also had a Corvair, and that was fun to drive. What do they call it? The Unsafe at Any Speed, Ralph Nader's book. But that was a phenomenal car. I loved to drive that car when he let me with the top down, and it had a turbocharged engine, and I think I must have been 18 or something like that. And to drive that car around was just fantastic experiences. And of course, as the car got older, in the old days, the convertibles weren't the same. The convertible tops didn't have the same quality, so the car eventually leaked, and the rag top splits, and so you had all kinds of worries. But, you know, fast forward 50 years from that, and here we are today, and convertibles are in some ways kind of pretty much back in vogue, and many manufacturers have convertibles, whether it's a rag top or a hard top. And so what do you think about the new wave of convertibles, if you will?
I'm really impressed with what's coming out now. They all have, they're really nicely, the stitching is far better, heavier material. They fit tight. They're not leak prone. Most of them have glass windows now, so you can actually see out the back.
Yes.
That's a huge good feature. When they operate, now you can actually be on the fly. Some of them are up to 30, 40 miles an hour. You can push the button, put the top downer up. Where before you had to stop, throw 14 manual latches,
yeah,
16 different snaps and buttons, and it was quite a chore. Not a big deal, but compared to nowadays where you push a button while you're still driving, that's the way to go.
Yeah, it really surprised me. I think you pointed it out to me the other 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had a new Volkswagen, and I read finally that you could put the top up or down at 31 miles an hour, and I think in the old days the top would have blown off.
Oh yeah, you would have lost it at 3 miles an hour.
Yeah, so I think that it would be a little odd going down the street and doing it at 31 miles an hour, but you could, and you triggered a thought. I even up 4 or 5 years ago when I had like a Honda 2000, or I had other convertibles. There was little latches, and they had to fit into a certain hole, and you had to do this and do that, and you might have to manipulate it a little bit. The Volkswagen, you pushed a little button, as other convertibles, you push a little electronic button, and the Volkswagen went up and down in about 12 seconds. It was faster going down than up, but not by much. And just to push a button and watch the whole thing take care of itself, that puts convertibles in a whole nother stratosphere in terms of the convenience of having one, right?
A little better than the old canvas flap that you push down on the Bugs from the 50s and 60s, huh?
Yeah. So if you were going to buy a little sports car to tool around in, if you were going to let's say you're going to buy a Mazda MX-5 Miata, would you consider only the hard top? Would you consider the convertible rag top? Would you consider the convertible hard top, which is pretty popular, I guess, and looks pretty sharp? or would you not just say no, convertibles aren't for me, or would you buy one?
Oh, if I was going to get a Miata, I would get a convertible.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, you have to really like the sun. You're sitting out there in the sun. It can be hot. And if you're doing a long distance drive, you really want the top up, I think.
Yes.
You really get beat up from the wind.
Right.
It's just noisy. You can't hear your stereo. You can't control the climate. It's just, I don't know. Gosh, I'm getting old, huh?
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, I think it's been 3 years or so now, but one time I had a convertible, and I think it was a Miata, and just to see what it would be like, it was kind of a late fall, early winter day, and I had a jacket on, and I kept the top down all the way from Sacramento to my mom's house in the Bay Area. So it was a 90-minute drive. All of it's freeway, except when you finally get to her frontage street where she lives and where we live. So it was at a 90 miles, 87 miles around the freeway, let's say, and it was difficult to when a 18-wheeler goes by or there's noise on the freeway and you're kind of afraid that something's going to come into the car. It was a little bit uncomfortable to go that far, even on a cool day, with a convertible top down. There's just too much noise and too many distractions. I didn't really like it very much.
Sure, yeah. My wife currently has a SLK Mercedes, which is the folding hardtop. But with the top, I don't put the top down much because it's unless it's those once in a while, those really nice nights when it's warm out, you can't beat it. But other than that, I'm a top up person.
Right. So I think you have a list of some cars that you might think would have convertibles, and some cars that you might be surprised that have convertibles. So what did you come up with when you did a little research on convertibles or lack of convertibles?
Well, I was looking at the first list, and it's a rather long one, the manufacturers who do have convertibles. But the ones they do, they only have maybe one or two cars. So it's a pretty small amount of their lineup. VW, they only have the Beetle. Mercedes-Benz, they have, I think, 3 cars. The Mazda only has the MX-5. So Chevrolet, Corvette, Camaro. Ford, just the Mustang. So it's a pretty short list. Now you get into the hypercars, the Lamborghinis, Bentleys, Rolls, Ferraris. They have quite a few, but that's up in the stratosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I did look at who doesn't have convertibles, and I was surprised. Was Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, except for the Wrangler, which really isn't a convertible, but the plastic top does come off on snaps. And then Lexus and Infiniti, I was amazed that, and then Subaru.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few that don't even try.
Do you know, Bruce, about price points? Does some of the cars, if you get a convertible or if you get the hardtop, what are the differences these days in terms of, is it considered a full option and it's a couple $1,000s, or are they fairly equal, or do you know?
I thought they were quite a bit more for the ragtop, but I know like the Datsun Z, the starting point was like $5,000 difference.
Is that right?
Of course, the manufacturers also pack other packages on there, of course, but still, it costs them because they, depending on the vehicle, they actually have to, they have to do extra work on it.
Mm-hmm. I noticed in this Volkswagen that I had 2-3 weeks ago that when you put the top down, it completely obscured the rear view.
That was in the Fiat 500.
Oh, that was in the Fiat 500.
Yeah, it obscures when the top was down, it obscured the rear view out the mirror. And it takes, depending on most all the vehicles, it takes all your trunk up.
Right.
So you don't really have a trunk anymore. I know the SLK, the trunk is cut. 3/4 of it now is with the folding hardtop in it.
Okay. How about the quality? We were laughing earlier about the cheap ways they used to make the rag tops with lousy canvas or whatever it was. What have you noticed, if you have, about the quality of the materials and just how much more efficient? I mean, some of the ones they fit right into a nice little area, no fuss, no muss, and everything just is so efficient. What are they making the tops out of these days?
Way better materials. They'll have a thicker top that doesn't burble in the wind at speed on the freeway, and then they have a built-in, like I'll call it a headliner. So yes. It's dual layer, so that you don't see all pipe work up there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's stronger. You don't hear all the rattles. Most of the old cars were just rattle traps.
Yes, that's
you
true.
wanted to have I think the main reason why people drove with the top down, so they didn't have to sit there and hear the rattles. You put the rattles back in the trunk, and then the wind's blowing, you don't hear it anymore.
Yeah, one of the first cars I really had my eye on in recent years, and you mentioned that they don't make it anymore, and I really thought it was terrific. I know it was a little bit expensive, was the Volkswagen Eos, and it just struck me as a undervalued and underappreciated car. Hardtop convertible, looks sharp, but I think even 3 or 4 years ago it was in the low 40s to get that car, and I think maybe you could get one now 2 or 3 years old and get a deal on it. But I just loved the way when I drove it, 4 or 5 years ago. I just loved the way that car drove. I loved the way the hardtop convertible retracted and went back up. And it was the first time I really thought I could get this convertible. I like it quite a bit. Of course, now Volkswagen's had all kinds of issues since then, and maybe people just aren't going to buy Volkswagens anymore. But I really liked that car. And I've also driven a
funny looking car.
But also I've driven one of the Volvo sedans with a retractable hardtop, and that was, of course, Swedish car, and it's very efficient and very wonderfully made, and like a piece of art almost. So
yeah, we're talking folding hardtops now. That's a little different.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. There's not many of those out. There's Volvo, Mercedes has 2, BMW has at least 1. The Z4 is a folding hardtop, and then the Miata MX-5 RF, which is, what is that, this year or last year it came out?
2017,
so
I think.
It really makes it a Targa, but
yeah.
So they're really rare. I don't know if it's patent law or I don't know why there's not more folding tops, because I'm a folding top fan, because then you get both worlds there.
Right.
You get a hardtop and a convertible without all the rattles, shakes, and leaks and
and in the bad weather in the winter, if you have a folding hardtop, you don't have to worry about some big heavy storm. And even though the quality of the materials on convertibles is much better than it used to be, still that must be really noisy if you get caught in your convertible somewhere on the open road and it's coming down pretty hard. That's not a fun way to drive with a ragtop.
No. And then some cars had that ragtops that you could buy a optional hardtop for too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know the current the latest T-Bird that came out. I don't know, they're 10, 12 years old now. Mm-hmm. Those T-Birds you could get they were a hardtop that lifted off, and then it was a ragtop underneath.
Oh.
You don't ever. It looks like a finished car, but it's a lift up top. And the old Vets you could get hardtops for. Even the Boxster, I don't know about the current bodied Boxster, but the previous version, you could get a hardtop for the Boxster, mm-hmm. so you didn't have to have it convertible with a ragtop on it.
Recently, we went to a whole variety of different shows at the Monterey Auto Week, and we went to Mecum Auction for the first time, and there were quite a few convertibles down there, and what do you call in the Vanagon days, if you would? And they didn't have a convertible, but they had the folding back kind of canvas.
Sure, that's that folding throwback.
Yeah,
slide back.
Slide back. That's what I was. What is that? What they call them? Slide backs, or do they some?
I don't know.
So not really a convertible, but you got the open air feel, and those cars were from what, the 70s and 80s that they made those, or through the 90s.
Well, we had one as a *58, I believe, and it had that in it. But there again, they were poorly made. They were leak prone. They were noisy. They're more expensive to buy, so you don't ever see them around anymore.
Right.
But boy, that was sure fun.
Yeah, and I do see from time to time on the road, you'll see a real old, a 30 or a 40-year-old Cadillac convertible, with big fins or something, a 15 or 16 foot long old Cadillac, and the mechanics of those convertibles must break down all the time, because it's a big car to get that whole thing back there. And how do they tuck those in? I don't even know if they have
I don't know. Yeah, just think of the resale value on not necessarily classic cars like you just mentioned, but just a standard
muscle car of some sort.
Muscle car or something. Now those, because they were just throwaway cars, there weren't many muscle cars made with convertibles. I'm thinking Challengers, Chargers.
Yes.
Those things now are highly sought after if you have a convertible. There weren't many made, and they're the bomb.
Right. And if you were able to find one of those, you think it would be 20% more than the hardtop variety, or was it hard to say?
I would think it'd be more than that. If you, like a Hemi Cuda, I think they only made 10 of them in 71 or whatever the numbers are. It's something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
So they'd almost double the price of a hardtop.
Right. Now, one other thing I thought of, and we hadn't discussed this, but if you got an old Jeep, and they were open air to begin with, right? There weren't tops to them, and if you wanted an old Jeep, I could be way off here, but if you wanted an old Jeep and it came as kind of an open air top, could you buy a top to put on it?
Oh, for a Jeep you can,
yeah,
sure, easy.
Uh-huh.
When you start and talk about old Fiats and Mercedes and stuff, I don't know. Well, maybe for Mercedes they might have them around, but for your old Fiat, I don't know if they have those parts or not.
Yeah, you're just out of
luck. That's the problem. You get an old, kind of shaky car. It's not too good. Now it's old and probably been leaking for years and years. It's a rust bucket, and they go to the trash.
Yeah, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer now. One of the test cars I had was the Honda 2000, the little sports car, the Miata's competitor.
Sure, yes.
They're still making them, and they might be. I don't think they are, but maybe they are. But we drove that car with the top down to Mendocino on a kind of a getaway weekend. And by the time we got to Mendocino, we had to decompress for a while because it was a rough trip through those. I just wanted to do it, and my wife agreed if we had the top up on the way home. We did, but for 5 hours we had the top down. And
that's a long drive. You might as well be on a motorcycle.
Right. We were sunburned, or your hair's. You just get tired of doing that for a long drive. But I wanted to do it just to see what it was like. And one day she had another function to go to, and I drove on some of the country roads by myself with the top down, and it was more overcast, and there's tree lines, so I didn't feel the sunburn or the downside of that. It was a blast, like we talked about before, on a country road on a decent day. So there are big pluses and big minuses for convertible. So I guess my question to you is, if you were considering a convertible, you would probably only opt for a hardtop.
I'd get a folding hardtop.
Folding hardtop. Me too. I don't think the other ones are. They're not. They're not year-round cars, unless the top is up, and then you're risking really bad weather, and the top's going to, even the newer ones with better materials are probably going to get destroyed after a few years.
A ragtop's fine, I guess, if it's a lease vehicle and you're going to get rid of it in 3 years and you don't have to worry about it. Hey, get a convertible.
Right. So.
And put up with the rattles, the extra noise. Maybe it gets stuck in the up or down position at some point, but the dealer will take care of it.
Now, I triggered another story. I was in a Miata 2 years ago, and I was over at one of the shopping malls, and I pulled up, and there was the same exact car parked to my left, and I was getting out of the car, and this other guy was getting into the car, and the guy was 6'4" or 6'5", and I looked over at him, and he was kind of somehow manipulating himself back into that car. He may have put his legs from the back to the front and didn't even open the door. He was getting in the car that way, and I said something like, "How you doing? Nice car." And he looked at mine. We laughed, and I said, "That's a pretty small car for you." And he said, "Yeah, but it's worth every second of it." So this guy was a convertible guy. It's like sometimes you've driven and you've seen a dog with the head on the top. This guy was a 6'5" guy, and he was the top of his torso and to his head was all outside of the car. He looked pretty awkward going down the road. But he was a guy, it didn't matter. He just wanted that convertible. If he was 7 feet tall, he probably would have had the convertible. He just loved the idea of being in that car. So there are those types of people. I don't think I'm one of them. I'm going for the foldable hardtop.
I think so. Or you ride a motorcycle.
That's why I ride a motorcycle. Well, thanks very much for joining us on episode number 9 of the Weekly Driver podcast. My name is James Rea, editor and publisher of the Weekly Driver. My co-host is Bruce Aldrich. If you'd care to support our efforts on the podcast, we have a sign-up button on the main page of the podcast for a PayPal sign-up. We'd appreciate your support. And until next time, we'll talk about some other kind of cars next week, and we look forward to having you with us. Take care.
Bye, James.